So I'm Steve McDowell, Chief Analyst at NAND Research, and I am at Nutanix's office in Durham, North Carolina with Nutanix's Greg White. Greg, thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. I'm excited for the conversation.
Beautiful offices. So I want to talk about edge and how enterprises are, expanding their footprint into the edge, their infrastructure to the edge. But before I do that, I think it makes sense to kind of level set. For a long time, when people think about Nutanix, we think about HCI, hyper-converged infrastructure. And, 10 years ago, that meant something very specific. It was an appliance. It had compute and storage and networking all kind of in a box, hyper-converged. But that's changed, right? I mean, how do you view HCI, and how does that kind of fit in infrastructure management software?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've really seen this evolution. HCI is still really that underpinning. That's the technology that gets built upon, but it's those additional services that are really where you see a lot of value-added needs for different organizations. Whether it's the data protection piece, whether it's microsegmentation, security, being able to do self-service, all these things that make using that HCI so powerful and so much easier.
But HCI, it's wrong to think about it as an appliance.
Correct.
It's more a virtual appliance because you're deploying HCI solutions. I'm just a dumb analyst, right? Help me understand. You're deploying HCI solutions to manage cloud resources, right? Is it really the kind of consolidation of resources with a single management plane, or is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, you think it's that software defined. Originally a pool of resources was that appliance, right? Now it could be bare metal in the cloud, like you're talking about. It could be one server in an office. It could be a whole pool of them. So yeah, it's really that management of this pool of resources and using software to abstract all the complexity away, that's underneath, and running it anywhere, right? On any of those different types of locations.
Okay, and the value that brings me as an IT administrator is really, it simplifies how I manage my infrastructure, right?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I'm abstracted away from the hardware. I mean, somebody I'm sure cares about what's in the rack, but most IT administrators don't.
Right.
I'm deploying, like you guys have database as a service, right? I'm deploying data. It's all push button kind of infrastructure management.
Yeah, it's this idea of, I don't need to manually do everything. I want to be able to automatically provision a database, a VM, have the right image for a virtual desktop, and take all the single steps, the manual steps we used to do in the past, and just make that part of the software management of those resources, and assigning just the right resource for that workload, right? With the ability to then easily scale it, change it, if you need to. You're not locked in. And
that makes a lot of sense, I think, as HCI has evolved, so has the industry, right?
Yeah.
10 years ago, cloud had a space, on-prem had a space.
Yeah.
But today, right, if I'm an enterprise, I'm crossing cloud boundaries, right? Have cloud, have on-prem. I might have more than one cloud.
Yeah.
And using kind of a control plane like Nutanix is delivering, or a set of features, right? That works across those boundaries?
Yeah, that's the great piece about it. It's running workloads anywhere, right? But doing it with that same common operating model. So that pool of resources that I have on-prem in my data center, the way I manage and run it and run the workload on Nutanix is the exact same way I do it in AWS or Azure or a service provider cloud, as well as all the way at the edge.
Well, that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about that running an anywhere piece, right? Because in my mind, managing cloud resources doesn't look that different from managing on-prem.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you don't get to touch the hardware, but the same buckets are there. And what we've seen happen in enterprise IT over the past, say, 5 years is kind of the explosive growth of edge.
Yeah.
Right? Some of this was enabled by 5G, and a lot of it was enabled by 5G. And then I think it's being accelerated right now with AI at the edge. And extending my IT infrastructure to the edge has its own unique set of challenges.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a traditional data center, right?
Yeah.
From the physical location on up. What are you seeing well, first validate that, right? Are we seeing increased adoption of edge?
Yeah. I think the other thing is there's all these new workloads and new use cases as we've gotten more into customer experience, into using video, analysis, like you're talking about, kind of the old school AI, as well as the Gen AI piece. But we're seeing just a lot more different needs for IT and data collection and analysis and doing real-time decision-making, locally. You can't send it all the way back to the cloud or all the way back to the data center to do some of the things we need to do. Manufacturing, is another area, like, I guess the big thing to think that I have found that's changed is the way we talk about edge has changed and evolved too. Like there's big edge deployments like in a manufacturing facility, there's smaller at a retail store, and then you're even getting down to just like one node kind of deployments.
But even in a retail environment, right? Again, I'm looking at this from the perspective of the IT guy.
Yeah.
It may be 1 or 2 nodes so I can run kind of fault resilient in a location, but I might have 10,000 of those locations.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So suddenly, again, as an IT administrator, I have to care about fleet management.
Yeah.
I never had to care about that with cloud.
Yeah.
Right? So, how do I do patches? How do I do, software updates? A whole host of concerns, right?
Yeah.
Security is different. I don't have physical security, right? I might have to work offline, disconnected, right? Because, if I'm a retail store, lines go down all the time,
exactly.
right? So how do I address those challenges? Is HCI or an HCI-centered solution?
The edge robo, has always been a huge area for Nutanix that because hyperconverged infrastructure really plays well to the things you talked about. One, the consolidation of resources, right? Compute storage and all that. But that management layer on the top that helps with my upgrades, that helps with my data protection, that helps with, managing my resources and optimizing that. Works great in the data center, but it's perfect for also doing that at that scale, right? You can't go, even you want to deploy a new app to your 10,000 stores to manually go add that app.
Right.
And if you have the ability with HCI and that management piece to have a blueprint that just goes and deploys it the exact same way every time, and it eliminates a lot of that, challenge of manually doing things at scale. So it really plays a huge part.
Well, and the workloads too. And again, I think this is the evolution of edge, whereas, 10 years ago, it was self-contained in edge, right? Limited connectivity, right? You put it in a box, it's almost an embedded system, even though it's running price lookup tables at Walmart, right?
Yeah.
But now it's really, we're looking at workflows that are truly distributed, right? You talked about retail. I was at National Retail Show in January, and you walk into a retail environment, and there may be thousands of cameras. Yeah. Right. They're using cameras for security. They're using cameras for inventory management. Right. Is there an empty spot on the shelf? And that's not a person looking at that. There's AI running. Right. And you want that AI to run locally because the amount of data is just tremendous. But at the same time, I might have real-time pricing updates from the cloud. Right. I need to do transaction reports back to the core. So it really is a truly kind of distributed environment. Now, using something like a Nutanix solution, does that allow me to manage all of that kind of holistically?
Yeah, it's like we were talking about earlier, how HCI, that idea of run anywhere. So the things that I do in my data center, I can do them the same way at the edge. I have that same common operating model, the same data structure playing between the two, so that it's the same way of doing it, whether it's there or even the cloud piece, just like we talked about earlier. So that common operating model across locations is what the we call it a cloud platform basically, but the cloud platform that uses HCI underneath.
Okay, so we talked about retail, and I think that's an obvious one. Right? I mean, the back of a retail store, I don't know, our viewers, our listeners would be surprised to learn, is a small data center, right? And it's been that way forever, right? Because every time I'm doing a barcode scan, it's hitting a database on-prem. But where else are you seeing edge expand? I mean, is it, my perception is it's going to hit every organization that has an external footprint at some point.
Yeah.
Right? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, we have some interesting applications like in drill rigs, we see that. I was hearing from a customer just a couple months ago, drilling services company, and they were bringing in AI and computer vision for safety. So they have cameras around the wellhead and cameras on the rigs, and they're watching to see if dirt's moving, if somebody's too close to the well, and they can alert, so AI, doing the work of somebody having to sit there and watch, So we see kind of small, ships and drill rigs and that kind of size, but also, like you're talking about, more workloads in more places. A customer was talking about putting in loan application analysis using AI, but wanting to do it in branches. So, like the regulations in this state are different from that state, so we want the model to be, here and for this location kind of thing. So really seeing interesting new uses of AI, of edge.
And then the business guys throw those requirements over to the IT organization and say, make it work.
Yeah.
How does a solution like Nutanix, right? So you have a broad solution stack, right?
Yeah.
Is it all applicable to edge, or are there certain pieces?
Yeah.
How do I put that puzzle together?
Yeah, I think obviously, kind of depends on the workload, but there are some pieces, like we have database, like you were talking about, database services that maybe you don't need that kind of fleet management of databases in a particular site, but you might want to use it at the core for your fleet out all over. One of the other things that we see actually at the edge a lot too is file and object storage now becoming big, particularly these new kinds of workloads, and having that in our platform is the unified storage piece is an area. So a lot of it is applicable, in the microsegmentation piece. That's every one of those 1,000 stores is a potential vector into your data center, right?
Sure.
So having that microsegmentation and security part. So a lot of the platform really does kind of scale down to that edge piece as well as being useful in the data center.
Okay. So, again, going back in time, right? Because HCI is a loaded term, and I say, even I still struggle with this sometimes, because if you've been in the industry, then you develop a set of preconceptions,
right,
which aren't true over time all the time, right? So one of the pushbacks to HCI when it first emerged was, I have to scale everything symmetrically, right? If I need more storage, more compute, I'm screwed, right? Because I just add another box. That's not true anymore, or is it?
No, that's a good point. That was always a limiter, like I've got to go add both, but maybe this workload needs more computer storage. We've added the capability to scale those independently now. So you can bring in compute-only nodes, you can bring on storage-only nodes, so that, like a great example is databases. My database is licensed by core, right? And I can have, one, or by processor, right? Usually, I think. I could have one compute-only node where the database runs, and then there's a storage portion node where the data is kept, and you only have to license, where the database is running. So you're able to tailor those resources for licensing, but as one way, but really for the workload.
Okay. The other thing, so again, coming back to like preconceptions, you look at something like retail, right? And there's a spectrum.
Yeah.
If I go into a big box store, they're going to have a 19-inch rack in the back, maybe two, right? They're running my thing, or a hotel, same thing.
Yeah.
But then I go into my local convenience store, one right up the street. I get gas in every day, and they've got a server kind of bracketed to a piece of plywood, right behind the thing. Is a Nutanix-like solution, right, only for kind of those big 19-inch rack solutions, or do you scale down?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when I'm talking about edge, that's what I care about is, can I scale down?
Yeah. We have the ability to go down to 2 and even one node solution. So still server, we're not down to like an IoT device kind of thing, but But yeah, that ability to have just kind of a single, even a short depth server. We have, like I said, in drill rigs, there are customers that are using just a simple set of resources. They're running 5 VMs, and that takes care of what they need. And so with Nutanix, you can do that. You can scale down as well.
So when I started looking at how IT is extending to the edge, there's a lot of people. There are a lot of people that are saying, I don't need management software, right? Containers solve my problem. In fact, I think one of the earliest container demos I saw was at a vendor conference. It was from their labs. They never productized this, but they're running Kubernetes because it solves a lot of these same problems, right? It allows me dynamically push workloads out, but it only goes so far, right? In the solution set. How do you look at containers and how that fits? Is OpenShift an alternative to Nutanix, or do you say, no, these are kind of complementary?
Yeah. We really look at it like what you're saying in that complementary aspect, because there are still pieces of that infrastructure management, there's data protection, there's other areas where that container management, that fleet management, and especially at scale, is how HCI-based kind of platform could really complements what's done there. And we like to think about all the things we did for virtualization and made it so easy to deploy VMs and the right resources. We're doing the same thing on the container front. And so container is just that layer that uses the software-defined infrastructure optimally and more easily.
So you're not forcing a model that says I have to use AHV, that's your hypervisor, right? That I have to use AHV and virtualize everything. If I'm going down the path of containerization, and a lot of people are, just from an application development perspective, that's there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we think of, that's why we talk about it as a cloud platform, right? It's where you can run your VMs, you can run your Kubernetes, and we're even adding the enterprise data services that Kubernetes needs. A lot of customers, they can kind of do some containerization manually. There are ways for having those drivers and the CSIs into storage, but it's still kind of challenging, and especially at scale. And so we've added those enterprise data services in for cloning and data protection, all that sort of.
But you take a relatively open approach, right? As I understand it, Nutanix, you may dictate capabilities or recommend capabilities, but you don't dictate a hardware platform.
Correct.
Right, you're open.
Yeah.
So if I'm using a Dell PowerEdge or PowerScale, and they have CSI drivers, right, that just kind of works in the solution stack.
Yeah, and you can think, we have the flexibility on the front end. You can pick the Kubernetes flavor you want. OpenShift's a great one. Others, we have a built-in Kubernetes engine within that some customers use as well. And then, on the back end too, the hardware side, whether it's Dell or HPE or Lenovo or Cisco, like on and on. And then Supermicro as well is another one. But we have those. We've made it easy to use all those, and then that gives the customer the flexibility to pick. There are people that have affinity for different ones for different reasons, and that's great. We want to help them do that.
Well, let's talk about that choice a little bit. When I talk about hyper-converged, right? How far does that converged go? You talk about data protection a little bit. A lot of organizations have their favorite data protection solution, right? Or observability is something you don't take on, or cybersecurity. But it's core to how people manage their infrastructure. So how open and easy to integrate a Nutanix solution, or is it to integrate a Nutanix solution into third-party pieces?
It's a big focus. The partner, the technology alliance piece is huge. As a huge focus for us. We have APIs that allow you to third party or an organization to do some of those integrations. We've also done some of that integration and qualification work as well. I mean, think of like a Haiku or a Veeam that really has a little bit more integration into what we do from the data protection side. And so we believe there's that ecosystem is so important, and so we've made it easy for them to interact and work together.
And I think that bears out. So I've been, we were talking before we came on camera about Nutanix Next. So Nutanix Next is Nutanix's customer conference. You have it every year in the spring. But you go to the show floor, and I think I've been to 4 Nutanix Next. And the number of partners, right? It seems to get bigger every year. So, I mean, I think that speaks to you have an open ecosystem around kind of this core set of functionality, whether it's database or data protection.
Yeah, absolutely. And a real focus on continuing to expand that ecosystem. If you go this year, you'll see even areas that we've set up around AI and other partners as well. So.
Okay, so you've gone, it's been a big year for AI in the industry. I think we're at a point now where when people say AI, our minds immediately go to generative AI, large language models. But I think as we alluded to earlier, right, that's not the AI we're seeing at the edge, not yet. Right, it's coming. We're really seeing things like vision processing, right? It's just kind of your I don't want to say boring, right? But it's kind of your inference. And you support that, right? Nutanix has, you do GPU pass-through, right? So I can, whatever accelerator I need to have, that's present. And if I want to use large language models, you even have GPT in a box, which is kind of a cool reference design.
We started getting a lot of inquiries, right, from as this generative AI thing is blown up. We've been doing AI for a long time, like we talked about. I saw a tweet the other day from Tractor Supply where they were talking about how they just rolled out some a camera vision for, if somebody's over by the propane tank, send somebody out there to fill it for them. If there are too many people in line, send an alert to the store to have people come using that computer piece, a vision piece. But we're also now seeing, this need for a little bit more, a little different. And so we did GPT in a box, which is basically an opinionated stack of what are the pieces you need to deploy a model with the data flows, have the storage, the file and object.
So it's kind of like a validated design, reference architecture kind of thing.
With some services to help move it along. So really the idea is to get to pilot quicker, to get to production more easily. And have this predefined piece with like services where you help scope out what you're going to do, decide on your deployment, and then actually get everything going. And that common operating model that we talked about, running anywhere, that idea, okay, I'm going to run the model here at the edge, but then once a quarter I may want to send it back to the data center, update it with new data, maybe regulations change for that loan analysis, and then send the model back, and you don't have to recreate it every time and have different underlying infrastructures it's running on.
And we're going to see more of that. I think we're going to see generative AI and large language models. It's going to be retail first because it's all about the user experience. Right? We're already doing self-checkout. Right? We're already doing self-banking. Right? It's going to be that virtual agent in front of you, which needs to run locally. Man, you're talking about a lot of stuff, and it's so. The beauty of HCI or an HCI-based architecture has always been simplicity. But yet, right, you're talking about a lot of moving parts. I go to Nutanix.com and I pull up your portfolio picture, and I'm just lost. There's like 75 different pieces that it seems like a lot of choice. Is that deceptive? Is it really simple? And how are you guys helping onboard new customers who may not be familiar? Because a lot of people are coming from VMware, a lot of people are coming from containers, a lot of people are just coming from the street, right?
And we still have so many people coming from SAN, right?
Right. For sure.
That move,
from
that
legacy.
First move to HCI is, but there are a lot of different services, but it's all that central management plane that we call Prism, but it's all through that same pane of glass, right? So I can go in and I can see what my VMs are doing. I can see containers. I can see locations. For the edge, I can put tags on them so that like this is a small location or this is northeast, and then you can filter and do your work, based on those tags. You don't have to know every name of everything. So there are different pieces like that, but it's all managed, through that same pane of glass, same experience, and we apply this one-click philosophy. Like we want to make everything one-click simple. Want to do an upgrade, it's one click, that kind of thing. So that HCI and the management software-defined piece helps, make that real.
And does Nutanix help me with my onboarding? Do you have, I'm guessing, training, professional services?
Yeah.
I mean, kind of what do you bring to the table?
Yeah, we have both of those. We've got partners, that have been certified and, really know the technology that can help as well.
Or you do a lot of business through kind of the VAR and system integrator
Yeah,
community.
100%, through OEM or the
Okay.
channel. So, then, like you said, there's Nutanix University, which has courses and trainings, and so there are different ways to get that experience. We also have what's called Test Drive, which is online user demo environment, and so you actually go in and see the software working. Can mess with it, and it's all cloud-based. You don't have to install anything.
Nice.
And they're curated so that you can see different things. Like if you just want to see storage, file and object, how do I add, that to my environment? You can see that separated, or you can see it, but it's all going to look very similar because it's all going through Prism, through the same management plane.
Well, thank you, Greg, for taking the time. So I'll see you in Barcelona, I hope.
Absolutely.
But it's been a great discussion.
Yeah, I really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it, and I've learned some stuff here too, so it's great.
Well, good. And thank you for tuning in.